This is Fan Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Tony Leonard. Welcome to the Fan Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Senor Phantom Electric Ghost.
So I want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see the icon up there that says listen on Newsly. And for the audience, if they use coupon code GHOST, they can get 1 month free premium subscription. So they can listen. That's an audio only platform. We are a featured podcast. You'll be able to listen to that sometime tomorrow or later tonight. And then the other thing is, we're actually at episode 996 of the podcast, tracking on Apple Podcasts since
Woohoo!
2016. And today we're going to talk about holistic career coaching, and we've also got your website up, and that will be fully clickable. That's Tony Leonard consult coaching.com/services. Again, that will be fully clickable on all the major platforms that we're on. Once the podcast is published, you'll be able to click through on that. So, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing again?
I'm great. I am excited to be here. Got a chance to listen to some previous shows and really exciting, cool guests. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, it's fun to talk to people around the world. And you're a career coach who works with creative professionals, and that's been my kind of area. We started this podcast in 2016, primarily dealing with singer songwriters, and then we moved into actors and poets and other types of creative people, film directors. But lately, we've been talking to all kinds of people, and we're expansive. In the nature of our expansion is in our music, we do multiple genres: punk, rock, folk, hip hop, everything, and jazz.
Cool.
And so we decided when we did the podcast, we should do the same thing. And so we decided, like, we'll not only talk to musicians, but we'll talk to life coaches, therapists, CEOs, everybody. And so the common
Yeah.
thread has been creativity, or the idea that, even if you own your own company, you're creative. You're a life coach, you're creative. You're an author, you're a mentor, you're creative. So
Yeah.
that's the common thread that we try to thread the needle. But you've been 13 years in helping people with professional pathways and creative people. So maybe you can talk about your background to the audience and kind of give them like your elevator pitch.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you said, been doing this work helping people with their professional pathways for now 14 plus years. Um, about 10 years ago, I started a music artist management company. I thought I was going to take a band, and take the next strokes or something to the heights of musical fame and glory. That did not happen, but I learned a lot about working with artists. And I've always loved music. I play a little bit. Uh, and I love creativity, and I love the broad definition that you bring, that you just stated. That's also how I think of creativity, is bringing something new into the world. It's such a vulnerable act, whether it's a business, a song, a poem. You bring something new and personal into the world. You're opening things up to get criticized, possibly embarrassed, and especially in the capitalist system that we live in. Art creativity is not something that is prioritized, to say the least. So I would, while I was doing artist management, I realized that as much as I wanted to help the bands and artists that I was working with, make an extra 5% at a show, like that wasn't where my heart was at. My heart was at helping people develop as people grow, as people, as musicians, as artists, um, and more broadly, tap into more financial success. And
Hmm.
as an individual, and so, I 4 years ago I started this current company where I'm working with creative professionals and helping people who are creative in different ways and helping them get paid well, and also live better. I mean, my
Yeah.
litmus test is to increase joy and decrease suffering. And if I can do that with a client, then I've been successful.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people, a lot of people that are creative, it's kind of a hard thing when you get that spark. I've met a lot of people that it's hard to actualize because a lot of times you get these creative people like they never show their work. Right? I've dealt with painters and they're like they got this amazing work and they're too scared to show it. Or I've talked with songwriters that just want to they have all this great work, but they want to clone whatever's hot, right? And I'm kind of I rather hear the song you're so scared to show anybody and work on that because I feel
Yes.
that really makes you who you are, right? Because
Hmm.
Taylor Swift, Beyonce, these people are already out there. So if you just try to run the algorithm and match to get a billion views, does that really give us anything that we really want? It may be that's the problem I see with a lot of people today. They use AI, they use cloning stuff, sampling, and I'm a keyboard player. I've got all my Moogs and my Rollins and stuff, and that's not the game people play anymore. It's like, oh, just cut and paste, use AI, use sampling. Nobody wants to actually play for 5 minutes, hand play something, play the bass, play the keyboard. They just want to move things on the bars and try to get whatever the algorithm's going to push. And to me, I'm a child of the '70s. I'm a child of listening to vinyl, listening like progressive rock bands, punk bands, funk bands, you know, people who were jam bands like the Allman Brothers, Dead, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Love it all.
Modern
Hmm.
day like Vedder, Eddie Vedder, and Pearl Jam. People go see him every night because he changes the lyrics, like the way Dylan used to do.
Hmm.
Dylan would go and sing "Idiot Wind" 3 different ways, and so
Mm,
you go one
mm.
night he has a different character or a different passage. So to me, that's the point. Is like why go to a show and have somebody hit the box on their DAW in Ableton Live kicking out what I hear on the record when I'd rather go see you actually reinterpret it and feel the audience. And that's where I think a lot of people today it's like missing the boat of like just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That is the truth. I mean, I would say, I don't know if most, but definitely many of the best shows I've been to, best bands I've heard, never became popular and well known nationally or internationally. I mean, uh, there's so much music and art that's in the pocket that is just missed. Um, and I think you like, to
Yeah.
me, there's two keywords that when you were talking come up is like vulnerability. When you're talking about that song, let me hear that song that you haven't played for anyone else, and authenticity, and saying don't show up like somebody else is showing up, show up like you show up. And that's scary. That's scary.
Yeah.
That's where, it's like, I don't really want to give you this song that I haven't played for anyone else. There's reasons why I haven't given it to anyone else. But that's oftentimes where the juice is.
Yeah.
And uh yeah, people. So one of the things that I need to do is help people build a structure of confidence so that they can move that into a marketplace or a job search. And you have to build up a, a foundation of confidence in order to say, hey, I am going to move this forward. I'm going to give this to people. I'm going to actually use it in some way to get a job. And there's many different ways to do that. I think one of the key things that I start with is a growth mindset.
Hmm.
Like, I haven't put my song out into the marketplace successfully yet. Like, that yet is a key word rather than like a fixed mindset, which is I was just not born. I don't have the DNA to put music out into the world and be successful professionally. It's like, no, like if you work at it for the next 5 years, you're probably going to get better than where you're at now. You know,
Yeah.
you might not be Beyonce. Like, let's really look at
Yeah.
the reality of the expectations and risk and probability of success. But if you work on something for 5 years, you're gonna get better at it. So that's, and then also, how do you build confidence? You connect with other people. You find your people. Life is a team sport, and resources, people can be online, they can be people in your life, but starting to tune into the people that are giving you positive feedback and tune out to all the messages that are saying you can't do it, like that's another way you start to build that framework, foundation of confidence.
Yeah, what I found, I've been playing. I'm 56. I've been playing since I was 17. Most of the guys that I started with when I was 17, if they didn't make it by their 21, they stopped. And I kept on going because I like to play. I like to write.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
now the thing is, like, if you measure all my songs, I got tons of. I mean, I've got probably like 5,000 recordings, right? And I write all my stuff. I'm in BMI. Now, whether or not I'm not a household name, but I've had Grammy award-winning producers talk to me and like my stuff. So there's to me that was like the acknowledgement of a couple these two Grammy award-winning producers that actually came to me and talked to me out of nowhere and said they liked what I was doing. That showed me I was like maybe I'm going on the right track if they see something in what I'm doing, right? And even then, whether they liked it or not, I was still going. But the whole point is like if you put something into the
Yeah,
world, then
yeah.
people come to you, right? And I have had opportunities to get into licensing and work on, video games and different things. But it's like because I put it into the world. If I kept on
Yeah.
saying, "Well, I don't know if it's good enough," and sometimes it's like being present and showing up. It's kind of like the podcast.
Hmm.
If you think about the podcast world, most podcasts fail after 12 episodes. I'm at
Hmm.
996. Now I'm not the biggest guy
Yeah.
in the world, but in some places
But
I'm in the
wait, let's just take
10
a time
in the
out,
top
and
10.
can I just say
Yeah,
congratulations for 996. I can't wait till you get to 1,000. But that's one of those things where you gotta like celebrate. You gotta be like 996 episodes that you've put out in the world. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but sometimes I just gotta say, hey, wait a second. You need to go out. Like, what I would do with 996 is I would go get myself some peanut M&Ms. Like, that's my jam. That's my thing. I don't know what your thing is, but I hope today you go out and celebrate a little bit, because it's an incredible accomplishment, and then people can be inspired by that. So we got to take a time out and acknowledge that.
yeah, but the whole point is just showing up because my grandpa was a coal miner, and it's like every day you show up and you do that kind of work, like whether it's a
Yeah.
coal miner work or whatever, it's like whatever you're moving a broom, as long as you're doing it, all work is valuable, right? So if you start to value yourself, like if you get this limiting belief that somebody said you're not good enough, your dad said you're not good enough, you can't ever do that, or you can't get into this, you can't do that. That's the problem. Like if you once you get the confidence and you go overcome your limitation of your own glass ceiling, then you get opportunities. I get like opportunities. People call me all the time, just because I'm out there and I'm present, and so things happen at different levels, and you can have success. But if you measure your success based on somebody else, then you're probably going to get disappointed. Like if you
Yeah.
measure every day that's incremental, what you can actually do, the fact that I know I can continue to write and I continue to do things and I know I can sustain it, then I'm going to get progress because until I'm gone, there's always going to be progress. That's the way I look at things.
Yeah. Two things you just mentioned are huge. One is comparison most of the time is going to kill momentum. You start to compare yourself to other people, that's just uh that's a death sentence most of the time. Sometimes it can be helpful, but when you start to get into, oh, this person's here and this person's here, I do it. We all do it. Oh my God, I'm doing it like all day today. But I'm also conscious of the fact that I'm doing it. I'm like, okay, wait a second. Like, I'm where I'm at, and like you were saying, the second point is like I gotta focus on the things that I can control. I can't control, how good Tony Robbins is doing, how many books that dude is selling. I need to focus on my coaching and think about how do I affect the world and impact people's lives in a different, unique way, and what are the particular things that I control. And if you focus on those things, uh, you give yourself a better opportunity to be successful. And the last thing on that is, you mentioned that your grandfather was a coal miner. It's like I tell people, especially creative people, like i- doing creativity professionally, you got to show up like a kind of working class work ethic, and you got to bring your hard hat and your lunch pail to work and show up every day and do your job. I
Yeah.
think it's Chuck Close, the painter, said that basically said that. I'm stealing from him, so I want to give him
Mhm.
credit. But you show up every day and you do your work. You play for you. It's like you play your music every day. It gets better. And a lot of times people just think about music and art as like you're just one day you're inspired to write a symphony, and it just hits you.
Yeah. It's
And then for the next 2 days, you're just in a mode of manic writing a symphony, and then it's done.
yeah,
The muse
that's
is left, but it's like no, 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 no. Show up every day, put your butt in the seat, and do the work.
well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like that workman, like at a Bruce Springsteen point of view. He had this kind of blue collar attitude, but he put a lot of work in. Like if you
Yeah,
look at him in the East Street Bands, like and Dylan, like Dylan would be at his typewriter when he was at Big Pink with the band. He's in there just jamming it out, and I would listen to like the full basement tapes. It's like 8 hours long. They put
yeah,
in so much work, and people
yeah.
don't always see the work that artists do. And some
Oh yeah,
people,
yeah,
they
yeah,
can
yeah,
have a
yeah.
flash in the pan, but usually it is the kind of workman. Like if you look at a guy like Prince, Prince put down like tracks almost
Yeah,
every day of his life. He was putting down tracks.
yeah,
Hendrix was putting down tracks all the time. If you look at a lot of my idols, they just put down tracks. It was a lot of work. And then you get the successes, you get the brilliance because of the amount of work they put in. It's like that 10,000 hours that somebody puts into that, 3-point shot. Musicians and artists, it's the same thing. If you put the work in, it just starts to have dividends.
yeah,
Like if that's the way I look at it, and people have workmen like it's like, yeah, there's some people that inspire to walk in the woods to walk. Yeah, you get different inspirations, but there's a certain level of skill you kind of have to build up and be dedication to your craft, and it's also believing in what you're doing. And if you have fun, my whole thing is like, why do it if it's not fun? Like
yeah,
if you're not having fun, then why are you doing it?
yeah, yeah. The fun is super key. And also it's not going to be fun every day. But if it's giving you, if it's bringing you joy,
Yeah,
most of the time that you're doing it, and usually the stuff that isn't fun is all the stuff that you have to do to make
yeah,
it,
make it work.
make it work and get paid for it.
Yeah,
But
that's the
if
hard
you're
part.
it is the hard part, and like that's why I have a job. Like it's not easy, and it takes support. It doesn't have to be me, but it definitely takes support.
Well, the career challenges that creative professionals have, I think a lot of times is, a lot of people just want to clone and copy and have that formula. And what I found with creative people, they kind of living at the bleeding edge. So what happens with the people you're living at the bleeding edge, most of the stuff you put out, people are like, they don't know what to do with it. Right. So they look at it and say, well, that's not this, that's not that. They don't know what to do with it. So a lot of times with creative people who are super creative, they have a hard time trying to like, okay, well, I got to tone it down or I got to package it this way and I got to find a way to get people to understand it because that's what seems to be there's like a disconnect between the work you're putting out and then people are like, oh, it's not that's not right, that's not good. As that maybe you can kind of speak to like, well, how do you help people with that kind of issue?
Um, Well, before I address that, you made a point earlier that I want to go back to just really quickly, and then I can address that. But you were talking about how many hours musicians and artists put in, and how we just see the tip of the iceberg, and like there is a giant iceberg of work that, like, for you mentioned Prince, Dylan, that those guys, they're putting in so much work, and we only see a little bit. And I think, I read a quote recently, like, if you work hard, I think this was Biz Stone, founder of Twitter. If you work hard for super hard for 10 years, then you're an overnight success. People
Yeah,
like people see
that's
like
how it works.
the part where you're where you make it and you hit, but it took like 10 years of behind the scenes work where nobody gives an F about you, and you're just slogging through the mud. And I'm not saying that it takes 10 years uh all the time, but that it's good to be reminded that uh and that's something that I help people with is let's think about the long game. What if we take a moment to take a deep breath and think, okay, our society really values speed, and by 19 you're supposed to start Facebook and be a billionaire. Most people, it takes an entire life to perfect a craft, or to add value to an organization. um, and so I like to just help people gain that kind of perspective and say, hey, wait a second, like let's slow down, let's incorporate some mindfulness, let's 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 think about the long term, how you want your career to unfold. And yeah, that's one of the kind of conversations that I have frequently with clients.
Yeah, because in my day job, I'm a software designer or developer
Hmm.
analyst. I've been doing it since the '90s. Now I'm a consultant, and I found a place that I felt more comfortable there because I want to be able to do my art. So I
Yeah,
have a good day job. It's better than most artists' day job because it pays pretty big. So I can
yeah,
kind of do so. I can buy the Moogs. I can go and buy the synths and the equipment I want to get the sound I want because I'm kind of a control freak. So I'm able to get the sound and use the equipment I want to get to and I have a very good idea of what I want to do with my art. Just like when I'm doing software design, I have a very good idea of what I want to do. So I'm able to kind of push things in a way that I don't have to accept the people who don't want that cutting edge thing. Right. I'm able to kind of do it because I can afford to do it. So it's like you have to kind of put yourself in a situation. Do you want to be a starving artist? Do you want to be a living artist? Can you actually find a way to live as an artist?
yeah. And that's huge as an artist. That question of like, just how are you going to make money? Let's be real. Like, and for a lot of artists, that means different streams of revenue. That means side hustles. That means like the full time job, and it can look a lot of different ways. And one of the things that I try to help people with is thinking really expansively. Like, what are all the possibilities that you could be doing right now to bring in revenue? What are you good at? And like in your example, you're good at software and writing code, and uh, building out programs. That's fantastic, right? Like you're able to leverage a different skill to make money that then allows you to do the art. And like you say, you're a control freak, but really what I hear is like you just want your sound to be like spot on the way you want it. Like you want to get it precise. I love that. Like if you're not out there with the expectation that you want your sound to be precise, or your writing to be precise and precisely like who you are, what you want it to be, uh that's part of being a good artist, a good creator, is to get that precision in what you want it to be. uh
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
when you
and
yeah, I mean, it's like when you identify, like, what is your the parameter of your art, right? If you're a musician, like, what is Phantom Electric Ghost? Like, right? So what is your brand? Like, so I kind of I have an idea what that is, and I'm not like searching for it. I know what it is. And so if you're
mhm.
doing any kind of art, it's like if you don't know how to define, if you don't know how to like live inside of that, or be able to execute it or self actualize it, then that's part of the problem. Like if you keep on shifting and you can't find it and you keep on, not that that's not part of the process, but you're not really comfortable. And it's not, art is never fully comfortable. Like we make a lot of mistakes, what I call happy
Mhm.
accidents, right? And I don't, I call them accidents because that's what, if you kind of go in a flow state and you let things happen, then you can go from there, right? If you think about a lot of jazz guys like Hancock and Miles, they live on the happy accidents. They live in that kind of experimental phase where like you take that chord change you didn't expect and you go with it instead of stopping and starting. And so if you can get into that flow state and you can accept the present and you can accept that chord change that you didn't expect, or the key change or the tempo change or the polyrhythmic change or whatever. Once you get into that mindset that you look at that as an opportunity, then yeah, the happy accidents actually aren't mistakes. It's a progression.
Yeah. I think anybody listening right now should just go back and listen to that again. That was some wisdom when you said accept the present and be able to go with the flow. It's really hard for people. A lot of people, I've worked with a lot of folks that struggle with making mistakes and working with accidents and reframing but that's why I think jazz musicians are the most
We live
like
there.
jazz musician, like the best musicians in the world. They can play all the classical stuff they at that level, but then they can also improvise. Like
Yeah.
who can do that? Like very few people can play at that level. And
But
I,
it's
I
like
work with a
everybody's gotta have the plan. A lot of times people have to have the written page. They have to have to know where they're going. The cool
yeah.
thing about a jazz guy that compared to a classical guy, I ran to a classical guy and I assumed because he can read Chopin and Beethoven and Bach that he could do what the fusion guys do. And he couldn't because he was looking for it to be written down.
Hmm,
And he
hmm,
couldn't figure and everybody was
hmm,
looking at
hmm,
him, I was like, "How come he can't feel it?" Because he has to have it written down. He can't
hmm,
intuitively know where to go if he hears it in the
hmm.
moment. He had to know, it had to be written out, and I was like, "Wow, he has the technical capability that he could do it, but his mind is restrained by the page. He is
Yeah,
restrained by the sheet that he can't get beyond it." And I was, like, so like, flabbergasted, like, he has the capability of playing, but he's, like, stopping himself.
yeah, yeah. And you bring up intuition, listening to your intuition, and that's something that I harp on with my clients is like you don't have to make a decision based on what your intuition is saying. You can run it through another process and critique it, but you gotta listen. I mean, intuition and especially with creativity, if you're in a job and you feel like you're a square in a circular hole and you're feeling stuck and your intuition is saying I gotta make a cheese factory. Like, I gotta get into making cheese. Like, I don't know why I'm feeling that. Like, we gotta listen to that,
You go with
and
yeah, you
maybe
go that
maybe
the
you're
universe
just
tells you something.
yeah, it's internal. It might be that it's giving you different colors. Like I'm seeing blue and gold. I live near Berkeley, so
Yeah,
I'm very tuned into the Cal Bears blue and gold colors. But intuitively, like I'm listening. I'm listening to myself, and I'm helping my clients listen to their intuitions and saying, "Wait, there's probably something pretty valuable there." You may not be able to access it the way that John Coltrane accessed it,
yeah.
but you can train and you can get better. You can get better at accessing your intuition. You can get better at taking it seriously.
Yeah, it's that it's the kind of that flow state. Like I know a lot of authors they'll do world planning, and I've talked to authors where they do very detailed world planning and flow and character design. But they've talked about like I did all that, and then I went into a flow state, and then like what did in the flow state changed my plan.
Hmm.
That I was willing to let my imagination kind of run wild and go into a flow state, and actually say, well, you know what I came up with in the flow is better than my plan. I think this is where you have to kind of make decisions like, okay, well, yeah, maybe I had this idea and then something else comes and you have to be willing to hear it. It's kind of like this thing that Hendrix used to do. He used to say, like, he'd be in a session and he'd go off and do something weird. And people are like, well, that's not where we were. And he said, well, the universe gave me this and I couldn't not hear it. He said that a bunch of times to people who were like, what do you mean? What the idea is like, that sometimes something happens and you have to be willing to kind of maybe not be so tied to the past and go with what the new thing is. And some people have a hard time with that.
Yeah. I mean, I work with a lot of folks who are hearing something, if it's intuition, if it's the universe talking to them, and they're struggling. There's a dissonance, there's a conflict, and the question is how do you first open up the space just to consider it? Like, we're often so taught, don't even consider it. You can't even consider that kind of a change, you know? So let's just first give space to consider. It's okay. Like, we're not making any decisions. We're not taking
Mhm.
any action yet. Well, the only thing we're doing is opening up the space to talk about, well, what is your intuition telling you to do? Well, where do you want to go? Uh, and then, then it's about, what's the next practical step? We go from that very open flow state, the universe is speaking, to, okay, what's the next actionable step? How do you go from um, playing a song that you're just feeling the flow, and then how do you go from that uh, to being a professional musician, or to selling that song, or to creating a side hustle that you can continue the musical process. um, and a lot of times it is just starting with the idea that, okay, just give yourself space to consider it, and then think about what's the first next practical step. It could be like, have a conversation with your friend who's doing it successfully,
Yeah.
a coffee with that person
Well, it's also one of the things I find is sometimes,
who
uh,
a warm connection.
well, you also need to sometimes have the quiet space because there's so much noise. So one of the times is like a lot of times, what I find as an artist is like, as a foundational thing is like you need to give yourself a space away from the noise so that things can come in. Because if you got too much noise, then things never come in. And so that's a hard lesson today, which people are so plugged in. But it's like if you can give yourself that space, and then the next step is to listen to other people, right? To have the feedback loop. It's like the beta session for an author, or the listening group for a musician, or the right, whatever you're doing, like a painters group to like look at what you're doing and give you that kind of feedback that yeah, whether you listen to it or not. But the idea is you have the quiet, you have a feedback, you have like a place you can do your pitch, your elevator pitch too. You can talk to people, but also after understanding, I think you've had this question you like to be asked is how has your mental health struggles impacted your coaching? I think a lot of people struggle with their own like mental like state, like whether you're depressed or you're in melancholy or you're frenetic or you have all kinds of issues that if you don't understand how to address those things, like how can you ever get to a good point if you don't assess where you are?
Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking about all kinds of issues, I was like, yeah, that's me. I got, I've suffered profoundly with mental health, with anxiety, panic disorder, depression at times. And when you suffer deeply, profoundly like that, well, for me, anyways, it punctures something in your soul, and but it teaches you. It has taught me something. It has taught me about what it is to suffer, and that for me has increased my empathy and my
Mm,
understanding of suffering and how people suffer for different reasons. I pay a lot of attention to how systems and structures create suffering, like racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism,
yeah.
sexism. These are systems that create suffering, and so when I'm doing coaching, that's why it's so important for me to take a holistic view. Because somebody might be struggling with some kind of mental health issue that's going to block them from pursuing a job. So first we got to figure out, well, okay, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to help you fix it, but I'm going to help you identify it and
Yeah.
help you connect to the right resources. Like, okay, let's
Hmm.
maybe a therapist is needed here, but who's the right therapist for you? And then let's also think about the structural barriers that you're facing. If we're not talking about that, then like we're
Yeah.
missing a huge component of how what the struggle is. And if you're a woman in corporate America,
Yeah.
let's look at who's been successful, and how do you manage that sexism that's happening on a day-to-day basis. So definitely my mental health struggles have taught me about suffering and empathy, and about how do you continue to move forward when you're in a state that's profoundly difficult.
But somehow it's really interesting because I've talked to people that totally about individualism and they think everything can be solved from the individual standpoint. But I was a sociology major and I kind of understand like a microcosm and a microcosm. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
things
yeah,
you
yeah,
can control as an individual. But if you're in a structure, I'm an African American. If you're in a structure and you have structural racism, you can only do so much in the macrocosm, in the microcosm, to affect a macrocosm situation like that. Now, I've
yeah,
been in in my career as an analyst. I've been able to be very successful at the analyst level. I've at sometimes tried to get to the managerial level and the executive level, and I've hit that problem
yeah,
where I've not been able to go past it because there's a ceiling. I can do everything I can, and I've worked for many, many years. But there's a structural problem there that some people don't want to admit. They want to say it's all the individual, and I totally disagree because been in the fight, still in the fight, and there's something there. And so the people who don't acknowledge that aren't acknowledging a reality because maybe they don't understand it or they don't haven't experienced it. But it exists. Just because you can't see it or you didn't experience it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
yeah. Just 1,000%. Yeah, I also come from kind of a sociology-ish background, interdisciplinary studies, cultural studies, and um, these structures, these systems, absolutely impact the individual. And so, when I work with individuals and teams, and so either one person or a small group, and we got to be thinking about how do you address how do you address these larger systems that, like you just pointed out, are playing in a role in what you can do as an individual and how high you can climb. And there's a bunch of white boys up there that are saying, no, wait a second, I don't see color, but we're not going to give you this job. Like, come on, please.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but so there
That's
there
because
are ways.
I was in a room one time. Yeah, but I
No,
was
no, go
trying to say,
ahead,
well,
please.
I would just to follow up. I was in a room one time where there was a bunch of guys and I was like trying to get. I was actually at a level where I was like a somewhat of an executive, and
Yeah.
I was the only guy in the room that looked like me. And one
Yeah.
of the head guys in the room said, "Well, we can have diversity of thought. We don't have to have diversity in terms of ethnicity or race. We can have diversity of thought." And I'm like, "Really? So you're saying this whole room could be everybody that just looks like you, and you guys have different points of view, and that's good enough?" And that's the problem in that mindset, because they thought that that was okay to even
Yeah.
say it to me being in the room, and I'm like looking at them like, because that's the problem, is that you
Yeah.
can't even get outside of that, right? So
Yeah.
that's when you try to get to that level, if that's the mindset, they didn't think it's fine. There's no problem because
Yeah.
they can't see a problem.
Yeah. 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 It's like, how do you what kind of dust can you or water can you put on it so that they can see it? What can you put on it?
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard. That's the battle. That's the fight.
that's the
But
battle, right? And then, like as you were saying, there are the macro forces, um, and it takes some luck, but it takes some guile, it takes some courage. Eh, but there are ways to say, okay, that is a barrier, that's a challenge. But with every challenge, I'm going to make an attempt to get through it or around it or jump over it. And you try and like, of course, I can't even imagine your experience as an African American man trying to get through that. But with all, I'm still like, let's see what we can do.
yeah, well,
you
my whole
know,
thing was I
and
decided what I could do, and what I
yeah.
could do is I could be professionally a consultant and be in the room with those people and not try to play the game of trying to be in a role, but be a consultant,
Hmm.
which means I can still be in the room with those people and I can still affect change, but I'm not going to get the title. I'm coming in as a consultant. So I said, I can live with that and still make changes and still
Yeah.
be in the room. So I got
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
room, but I didn't get the title. Right. So it's fine, but I'm still there. So I can affect what's going on by put things in their ear and being there. Instead of saying, well, I'm going to just not be there at all, I decided that for the last 25 years, I've been there. Right. So I've been able to affect things by being there, by not being so into like, I got to have the title to be there. No, I did it kind of backdoor. So if you're willing to kind of,
Yeah.
be subversive in a way and still be in the room, then you have to accept, like you have sometimes you can't get everything you want, but you can still influence things. So you have to figure out that balance.
That right, like this is how you use creativity, and some like you take a really creative approach to this problem, and you figure out a new way to frame it. Like, all right, I can't just go the traditional way because there's this obstacle called racism. Well, like how am I going to do this differently and creatively? uh and that's such a valuable, that's such a good thing to share, because it applies to so many different people, not just people in your position, but other people who are facing similar barriers. It's like, be creative. Find the side door, the back door, the window that's open. Like what else? How else can you get into this room and affect change? How else could you get into the position?
Yeah,
And that I'm real.
because they were
Just
so
when I'm helping
yeah,
people. Oh, go ahead.
they were so into the titles, and I said, well, if I can still get in the room in the
Yeah,
consultant role, then I'm still in the room.
yeah,
And some people get so hung up on position that they lost sight of like, are you going to not even be there, or you're going to get in there? And so it's a different mindset, but a creative mindset is willing to look at it that way. Where other
yes,
people got to be in a box, you're not willing to look at it, so you won't even do it. So that's the point of like taking a musician kind of creativity, and then using
hmm,
it in corporate America. And where people say,
yeah,
well, how could that work? But it can.
oh yeah. You gotta innovate. If the the traditional way of climbing the ladder isn't working, where's the other ladder? Like let's think about how we can reshape this. And I work with clients. After I had one client, she was struggling so much in her job, didn't even know it. Like our first conversation, we talked for an hour. I think she cried like 55 minutes. Like she had just so much pent up frustration, and she realized shortly after that that like, oh, I'm in the wrong place. Like I thought I was in the right place, but there's all these limitations and value disalignments. Is that a word? Disalignment? Well, let's just
Yeah,
use it today.
misalignment. Yeah, it's the same idea.
Misalignment. Thank you. Value misalignment. And she's like, I gotta get out, and that's another way to like say, all right, I'm gonna be creative and think about what's another. I'm gonna go work for a company that's more entrepreneurial, newer, doesn't have such a built-in archaic system. I'm gonna work for a company where I can add more of myself, be more of myself.
Yeah. I mean, that's
And
the thing. I
so,
mean, if you can actually go, be the consultant route or go and be an entrepreneur or be a LLC and you start doing your own thing and you
yeah,
start like being out there and you do corp to corp and like, I'm going to bring my expertise to the table and not
yeah,
have to be worrying about the yearly review, which was to me was the killer for a lot of my diversity was because they're trying to fit you in a box. And if you're
yeah,
trying to give this really different point of view, it only works when you're in the consultant space because then they're
mm,
willing to hear it, but they won't
mm.
hear it for the employee. But what I found is that they would listen to it from the consultant. So that was
Why
like,
do you
okay,
think
well,
that
that's their
is?
mindset. So it's just their mindset. Their mindset is like, they're like if you're coming from a consulting, the people in that consulting session can say things that the employees can't say because they're going to
Mm.
get the yearly review and they're going to get this and they're going to have these restrictions. So they won't even try
Right,
it.
right, right, right.
Where if
You're
you go in the
outside of
consulting
the.
group, like, yeah, I'm only on a 6-month, 12-month, 2-month thing, so I can tell the truth. And then they're willing to listen to me in
Hmm.
that scenario, but they won't even listen to their own people. I'm like, okay. But I learned that because I was one of those people. And so
Hmm.
so like
Hmm.
so that's weird. It's like that's how these guys that's how they operate. So okay, I learned how they operate and I know how to influence them now. But it's a
Hmm.
matter of like taking a lesson learned and then figuring out what to do with it. And sometimes,
Yeah.
like, you get these lessons and then you don't know what to do with it, or you don't listen to what the universe tells you. Well, maybe you should do this.
Hmm.
And it's really that creative spark that I think that that's where how you get to be the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs and the Tesla, Elon Musk is they knew how to push things and to be on that bleeding edge. And sometimes they fall off and they weren't always successful, but the willingness to go with something it's the fear factor that is the difference between the person that stays in the cube and the person that gets out of the cube. Is
Yeah.
the willingness to kind of sometimes fail or sometimes get the no. They say no, but that doesn't mean you don't stop. That you stop because they said no. You keep on going.
That's right. You know, no is just that's like that's the first place you go, and you're going back.
Yeah,
And
you
I
just
think
reconfigure.
you're talking about courage, right? And courage and being brave, and that's just going to be part of anybody's growth, professional growth. Like if you're just trying to go from one level to the next level up, it's going to take some courage and bravery. Uh, and we can think about it wherever you're at. Like this is why I like to take a holistic approach with my clients and listening to bravery and courage means something different to different people.
Yeah,
Some
everybody
people
has their own
want
thing.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah, like it, and that's so important too, is to not compare yourself to somebody, who like Elon Musk or anyone else, even somebody like if you know personally who's done something that you're really impressed by. It's like bringing courage and bravery to to your challenges, whatever they may be, and 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 doing it in
Yeah.
chunks that are realistic, saying, okay, this is the world that I'm in right now. I want to go slightly into my I want to lean into discomfort in some way to achieve some goal that I'm excited to achieve. It's going to take some courage and bravery, but let's not compare to what that means for other people. It's really like, what
Yeah.
does it mean for
Yeah.
you?
Well, I think it's brave, because you pointed out social justice is part of your coaching, and that's a brave statement in today's world. Because
Hmm.
in today's world, there's a lot of people I've talked to that don't want to go there at all, right? You can't
Hmm.
even have the conversation at all. You can't even touch it like a millimeter. Or they're like, oh, like I don't want to get into that. And I'm like, okay, with it. So I think that's really brave to me in this climate. The point that you point out that was part of your coaching philosophy is that. And I give you kudos for that because that's a big deal to me personally. But
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of those things where it's a core value for me. And if I don't bring it into my work, whatever I'm doing, but if I don't bring it into my work, then something is missing, and I've been given a lot. I was born into a white male, straight, middle class. I got a lot of gifts that I didn't work for, and then I've been blessed in many ways and worked hard for stuff, and it's just part of giving back. I think is recognizing that there are these sociological elements to the way individuals um, operate in life, and they're not always fair or just. Like, we're seeking justice, and that, hopefully that shows up in that there's the possibility that that shows up in everybody's work. You don't have to be an activist, who's
yeah,
organizing marches every day to bring a
yeah,
social justice perspective into the world. And especially as a white guy, I just think it's so important. Like, yeah, like most white coaches, white male coaches, they just they don't they don't talk about it because they don't need to talk about it. It doesn't affect them, It doesn't affect us.
yeah, yeah.
So
Where they think
it's
it's
easy
actually going
to
to
ignore.
turn off the customer. But also it's like, well, that's not gonna be marketable. So it gets into like a marketing concept. Like, well, I want to be able to market to these certain areas, and I don't want to hit the rail. If I hit the rail, then I'm gonna lose business. So I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
that's like okay, it's a choice. You make a choice because you don't want to be controversial. You don't want to like take anybody off. So they just don't talk about it, but they don't understand. It's like when you perpetuate that, then you don't
yes,
actually help change it because you're
right,
too scared to touch the rail. Like if you don't touch
yeah,
it, then
yeah,
nobody touches it. So my whole thing to me is like the revolutionary thing that I pointed out to a lot of young people that I talk to is instead of just rejecting working in corporate America, find a way to get in and be in a room,
yeah,
right? If you can get in a room and you get that experience, then you can take it away and do whatever you want. But you should try to get that experience to understand the structure. And it's
yeah,
kind of like you're in there, like you go overseas and you experience the world. If you experience what it is, then you get the firsthand knowledge of like this is what it is, and
hmm,
then you can start to like understand where the problems are.
hmm,
So if you firsthand knowledge of actually experience it, then you can go and try to come up with structures, and maybe you can do it from within, maybe you have to do it without, but you should try to get into it to just figure it out. And people are like, why would you do that? Well, they think about it.
yeah, yes. There are a lot of advantages to getting into something, understanding the culture of something, um, especially if we're talking about mainstream kind of mostly white male corporate America. It's like one of the way that can change. And there are several ways to change it, I think. But one of the ways is to be in the room, like you said, and to say, "Hey, wait, yeah, your diversity of thought
Yeah,
is pretty limited in scope when, like the five of you grew up together and went to the same college, like
yeah, you're all in the
that,
same frat. You're
you
all in the
know,
same frat. So what do you guys all think? Like you guys are all Delta Phi's or Alpha, whatever. Like okay, really? But
yeah,
yeah, like that's why women have been making strides to get into management, and the success stories. Like you said, if you meet a woman CIO or CEO or CTO, what is very beneficial is for them to go and to have mentor sessions with other women. You go to the
yep,
colleges, find the young women coming out of MBA programs, coming out of these, to try to, take somebody under your wing and give them I've seen a lot of people do that. I've seen people go and they go back and they get the young kids just coming out and they get them under their wing and they give them the benefit. That's really worth a lot. When you do that, then you give somebody a role model, then you show them the path, and you give them your experience, and there's a lot of wealth in that kind of coaching too.
for sure. That kind of mentoring. And I think one of the challenges with that is like we're asking these people who have been successful to do so much, right? Like you gotta, not only do you have to do your job well and fight through all the BS to get to the point where you get into the room that you want to be in and get the salary you want, and then we're asking you to go back and mentor, and there's just like that's where other people have to step up. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, when people go back and mentor younger people and tell them, "Hey, like, look at me, I look like you, and I've done this, I've accomplished this thing," that is that is so powerful. And then also, it's just got to be exhausting. For example, to be a black woman
Yeah,
who's made it in finance to then go and say go back to every college and high school and middle school and say like you got to fight through all of this and you can do it. But yeah,
yeah,
so it's up to all of
it's a
us
fight, but
to
it's good
change.
that you have like people like yourself that provide people coaching to understand like your empathy, like your understanding of your own situation, your own struggles. And I think that's why people become teachers, they become mentors, they become life coaches, because they learn that they can do beyond what is only for them. You can
Yes.
go and take that and apply it. So that's where like in your position, that you can help somebody figure out a strategy to be successful, um, even if they don't meet that CTO, that CIO, that CFO.
Hmm.
Right? They can talk to somebody like yourself and start to think about like what could we do. And it's good to have that oral conversation because I think that's how people learn. People can read it in a book, but when you actually have a talk with another human being, then you really start to get it.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think that is so fundamental and huge. Just having another human being where you can vocalize, have that conversation. That's a game changer.
That's where I think these webinars and podcast, what I've been doing all these podcasts, because to me it's like I'm getting so much wealth of information. It's like I'm getting like 1,000 hours of other people's ideas getting into my head through oral history, which is
Hmm.
the traditional human way of learning. So if I got
Yeah.
1,000 hours of talking to people all over the world, that affects my brain and it affects my development and it helps me, I think, understand things and be able to talk to people. It's given, and I've been able to
Yeah.
take the benefits of doing this podcast and use it in my business where people say, "Well, you're getting better at communication, Jones." Like, "Well, how's that?" Like, "Well, maybe because of the podcast. Maybe it's
You're
because I'm talking to
practicing.
people." It's like,
You're
yeah,
doing
you're
it.
actually doing it. Yeah,
Super cool and a really good lesson. And like, yeah, why are you getting better? Because you're doing it. It's like not shocking.
yeah, yeah. If it's like that's the benefit, It's like even if you didn't make any money from doing a podcast, the benefit of the oral history you're getting from the communication with people is like taking all these master classes. And that's
Yeah.
why it's like I'm taking all these master classes from all these people that know what they know, and I didn't know it, and I'm learning something new every day. And so
Yeah.
that in itself is valuable. Maybe not monetarily, you can't calculate it, but it's super valuable.
Super valuable. Um, yeah, it's hard to overstate how important and what a resource that is to hear from people and gather from their expertise. And that's one of the things that, like, I may not be able to speak from experience on a lot of these subjects, but we got this thing called the internet, and there's a lot of videos and people talking about this stuff. And so part of my job is to curate that information and say, check out this video, check out this
Mhm.
person, like this specific talk by this specific person I think is going to be helpful to you. um eh,
Oh, wow. That's
yeah, but I can't, like, yeah. And the fact that th- this we now live in this remote world, and there's lots of pros and cons, but one of the pros is how incredibly international it can be. And like, I'm having conversations all the time with clients that are all over the world. And
yeah,
that
and
is
that's
fascinating and
cross-culture.
amazing. Yeah, that's just so
But
incredible.
the cross-cultural impact, to learn. Yeah, I mean, to learn, like, if you're talking to somebody in Asia, you're learning Eastern points of view or Middle Eastern points of view or Eastern Europe or, anywhere you talk to, like Africa, you get these different perspectives that you wouldn't get. Like, I'm in New Hampshire. If I talk to people in New Hampshire, I'm going to get the New Hampshire point of view. Here's the North and the East Coast point of view. And that's what it is. And that's fine. But it's like if I get to talk to people in Japan and South Korea, and I've talked to people in Israel, I've talked to people all over the world, and you just get different ideas that it's not as limiting as if you just talk to your neighbor. Not that I don't like talking to my neighbor, but if I get when I get
Yeah.
these other points of view, it just opens up the world beyond just New Hampshire.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Like, I love my neighbors. They got some good thoughts. I love, I don't think I haven't been to New Hampshire recently. Lots of good people in New Hampshire. But yeah, there's, like, you talk to somebody from a different country who's grown up with a completely different experience, you get the different perspective, you get different ideas, and a lot of times you can incorporate those ideas into your own work and approach your own challenges.
Well, we actually hit our we hit our hour mark, which is always goes by faster than I think. But want to let people know about your website again, TonyLeonardCoaching.com. And maybe you can tell people, like, if they click on that link when it's clickable, which it will be as soon as we're published, what will they find there?
Uh, I recently completed a video with a buddy of mine who's a great director producer, and it's a great introduction to my philosophy of coaching. And you'll see how I work with people, what my value system is. More of what you've heard today. If you got to this point and you're still listening, like, thank you, kudos, that's incredible. Um, yeah, and also spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is such a boring place to hang out. So come on and visit me at LinkedIn. Tony Leonard Coaching is on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, there's good video content and written content, and I love helping people solve human problems. So yeah, reach out.
Well, thank you again for being on the podcast. We love to have everybody hear new points of view. And I think a lot of people could benefit from your point of your type of coaching where you're curating things and you're offering services. So I encourage people to check out your link. It will be fully clickable, and get in a path with you to maybe book some services or different things that you do. And I want to thank you again for being on the show, and have a good night.
Thank you so much.